Well, hey, Gundam Maniacs, welcome to another episode of Gundam Explained. For this episode, we're going to look at some of the community comments that have been posted. We're going to look at a Patreon question I haven't got to yet about the live-action Gundam movie. I'm also going to look at some lore that was posted about Double Zeta Gundam, about an unknown MS that wasn't used. And then we're going to look at some of the comments on the Witch from Mercury episode 12 reaction video that I did, since that was the last that we got of some cool Witch from Mercury lore. Curious what everyone thinks about it. But before we get started, if you haven't, please subscribe. And if you think this is a cool video, give it a like and check the links in the description for ways you could support the channel or just join our Discord where we have fun and talk about tons of stuff, including some of the lore that I'm going to talk about here shortly. All right, to start off here, I am going to initiate the old type eyewear. This is from Brandon Keith, who has always had some pretty in-depth comments to pass along for the Gundam Explained live show. But this was shortly after the latest updates about them finalizing the script, and that there's going to be some UC elements, but a little bit of Gundam for everyone. What does that mean? Well, Brandon says, interesting updates on Gundam live action. You see, the problem is they have to basically do something that honors the style and tone of UC Gundam, but modify it so that it's relatable to non-Gundam American sci-fi lovers and general audiences. It is impossible to translate UC Gundam beat by beat into live action. Anime in general is very hard to translate into live action for an American audience, and now with today's woke political agendas in filmmaking, animes often get watered down and drastically changed when translated to live action for US audience. I mean, look what happened to Cowboy Bebop. They had the perfect cast of actors, and yet they still screwed it up big time by going super woke. I hope the failure of Bebop taught a lesson to the people working on this Gundam movie. Now, it's very interesting because I do believe when woke is being used here, it's about where some social representation or ideologies are being pushed in favor of what the story is. And I think that's a weird balance, because I can understand where sometimes that's being done in maybe a predominantly entitled or mainly white, maybe American companies or producers in Hollywood. So I can kind of see where sometimes, if it's good for the story, maybe we can have some representation. But at the same time, I think sometimes this idea to put some sort of social awareness, representation in a story can ruin it, because it's focused on that rather than the story itself. And I think that's a fine line that needs to be worked on just as much as an anime being live action. I think that's completely possible, but it's a fine line of doing it right. I think, sometimes I look at things like The Last of Us show. I'm not really watching it, but people are loving it. The game itself, I didn't like too much. It was more of a narrative-driven experience that lends itself to a show. So I think a lot of times when you're making a live-action movie based on an anime, you got to look at what was the anime trying to portray, other than the fact that it's animation with a cast of characters, and try to be able to grab that essence and portray it live. And I think that can definitely happen with Gundam if the focus is on that grittiness, the verisimilitude, making things feel real and grounded, but also that despair, that fear because of the war that's happening everywhere. I didn't see the Cowboy Bebop movie, and I didn't even see the original, so I don't know what to say, although I do know that Ghost in the Shell movie with Scarlett Johansson was fantastic. I loved it. I rarely ever buy a movie in 4K, Ultra 4K, whatever, Blu-ray, but I did buy Ghost in the Shell because I loved the movie. I had never seen the anime, but I know that pretty much got buried underneath everything else because the main character that was cast was a Caucasian, Scarlett Johansson, when it was originally a Japanese character. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it should have had the proper representation, but at the same time, that didn't take away from a good story being told. Unless there's something I'm missing there, please let me know in the comments. Another issue is character names. If you notice in Gundam, what Japanese anime creators often do is the characters have either full-on Japanese names, Shiromaro, Kuraki, Yato Kobayashi, Mirai, Yashima, or Eurocentric names, Char Aznable, Anavogato, Aguile de Laz, or strangely spelled American influence names, South Burning, Ifar Synapse, that's a crazy one. Occasionally, a typical full-on American name will slip in there, Bernie Wiseman, Christina McKenzie, Nina Purpleton. But Gundam characters typically have awkward names. Amuro Ray, Bright Noah, Camille Badan, Paptimus Shirako. How do they come of these memorable but awkward names? Those kind of names won't work in live action. Remember Celeste Moses from Blue Destiny? Seriously. So I don't expect a funky name in this live action movie, but whatever they name the characters, the names must be memorable. Yeah, I don't think the names are much of a problem. In fact, Amuro Ray, Bright Noah, Camille Badan, I don't know about Papin Sirocco, but I mean, Badon is used as a last name and Camille is a girl's name. Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, but I think that's that fine line. Just do it right, and it can be done correctly. And another factor is ethnicity and race in Gundam. Anime typically portrays characters that look physically white or Caucasian, but whom are acting, speaking, existing in a Japanese way in a Japanese setting. In Gundam especially, it's like all the characters are either white, Asian, or Eurasian. People of color are often in the background, or minor characters are not seen very much at all. And it's funny because I always wondered why there seems to be so few people of color and so little diversity in the future that Gundam portrays. In the Hathaway film, which I love by the way, I found it awkward that they try to use real world locations in the Philippines and yet you don't see anybody in the animation that looks remotely like the actual ethnic makeup of residents who live in the real Davao City. You see a few people of color and people who look racially ambiguous with a brown complexion, but that's it. Everybody else is white. In Gundam Origin, they at least try to show some diversity within the world and show different counties on Earth, and they show different races, ethnicities, but that's about it. And I'm not bashing Gundam, all of anime is like that. And I think that's an interesting thing with how anime is drawn, where I think it's less this could be a cultural thing, but it's less about someone having stereotypical features, and maybe to a degree they might, but they typically will be like a basic complexion, or you'll find out through their name or their background where they're actually from. You point out the ambiguity, and I think that is probably what works. I don't know if that's intentional or not, being ambiguous about where they're from. Like even in Hathaway, I think there was a comment made toward Hathaway because they assumed he was a servant or something because he had that ethnic look to him, where I guess being that his mom was Japanese, I forget exactly what it was, but again, I wouldn't be able to really tell just by looking at how they draw the characters. But I think that's something that Japanese and anime shows do anyway, even if it's hard to really understand if it's a person of color or their ethnicity. They're very diverse, and I think you could then get away with just, maybe adding a little more diversity into a Gundam show. But I get what you're saying. A lot of times nowadays you do see where in a show or movie they are having to mix the colors, and I get it. I think we're just so used to casts being primarily white. I mean, even the original Star Trek, the whole point of that was to have a diverse, like Gene Roddenberry was purposely wanted a diverse cast because that wasn't the norm, and he saw that as the future. And I think even in Gundam, we see a lot of diversity, even if it's not too obvious. And yet with Eurocentric Japan-influenced names and whitewashing and Eurasian characters in Gundam, the military, the government, the population, and the culture of the people, and the characters in the way they interact at times seem very American mixed with Japanese influences. And I think that is just because of the big bombastic nature of the American military might, of the show of force. I think that a lot of times is used and absorbed as a way to really characterize what is going on. Especially a lot of things are from, like the bad guys are kind of from that World War II German era type thing, because it was such a crazy big thing that you can make a caricature of and make a bad guy easily of it. It reminds me of how in a lot of anime I've noticed they have like that regal look. You see people dress sharp, you feel like you're hearing organs playing and like giant chandeliers and ballrooms. I feel like gloves on, and I don't know, I feel like that's like something that's also again used a whole lot. It's very interesting because it's I can't say I know this, but it's like the Japanese in Japan, the way they make shows when they are showing other cultures, I feel like they do a good job of being ambiguous about it, but making it alluring. Then there's the functionality of the mecha robot mechanics, which has been discussed a lot already. All that has to make sense is how will the robots move and function, and then there's the whole science behind Minovsky particles. You got to make all that make sense to the non-Gundam fan and general audience, so to do that, compromise is required. I think the Minovsky thing can work. There's so many sci-fi shows where there's just this made up physics or magic that is part of, I mean, Star Wars and the Force. You know, I think the Minovsky, even if they use new type abilities, I think the Minovsky particle can be easily explained. Or it doesn't have to be explained. Really, a lot of times a good story can keep things in the background without it becoming a focus, just like how characters' relationships should be written most of the time. Or I guess they're the way they identify, not necessarily the relationship. And the way they move, I think that can be done. There's There's a lot of good movies out there that are not about mech combat, but include some mechanized, motorized, grounded stuff. A lot of Neil Blomkamp, which would actually be a great idea for a Gundam movie. But they got the guy that did that King Kong movie, so that works. But also Gareth Edwards, the way he grounds things a lot works very well. I would even say like Top Gun, how they're using jets. And I know that's not the same thing, but it's just about applying the physics that we would see and then applying it to the robots. I think it could happen. I'm guessing that there's going to be a lot of UC influences, designs, and references. The new movie will look and feel like UC Gundam, but a lot be changed too. It's necessary. It's not going to be easy. This film will either be forgettable embarrassment or will be revolutionary. It could go either way. Yeah, it could go either way. I have a feeling, though, it's going to be good enough, at least, I think, because I don't know if everyone agrees with me, but I'm really particular with things. It's like with Star Wars, I can be like, yeah, that wasn't that great. Or I could be like, that wasn't made that well, but what they're trying to do works. Just kind of like the prequels. Like, watching the prequels, kind of like, well, what was that? But that was cool. The world building was cool. And now a lot of people look back, especially after the sequels, and they love the prequels. And that's got to be the same thing with G-Savior. I can see its flaws. It's made like one of those late 90s or mid to late 90s sci-fi, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5. It's made like that. But they really did a good job picking who to do the acting, because I think the acting was well executed. The story was interesting. I think it falls into that same thing about getting people into anime. You have to get over your preconceived notions and judgment of things. I think I brought it up before. One of my brothers won't watch the original Gundam because it just looks too old to him, and he's older than me. But for me, I noticed it looked older than what I was willing to watch, but I wanted to stay for the story and the characters and see if it developed, and it sure did. Anyway, Brandon, thanks for this post. Love your stuff. All right, so in the lore channel in Discord, Will, who has been a longtime supporter, posted this unused Double Zeta design. So I'm a fan of Double Zeta, the show, and the look of the titular Gundam, the Double Zeta. I like the way it looks because as much as I like the Zeta, I love that the Double Zeta kind of backs off of that real sharp and angular design, kind of has a more classical looking Gundam head. But apparently there's a design here. It was Mamoru Nagano's unused Double Zeta design. And this is an article that was actually just posted recently by Sean O'Mara. Years ago, I wrote about Makoto Kobayashi's design process for Double Zeta Gundam, but his last-minute design for that series' titular mobile suit came at the tail end of a chaotic and rushed pre-production process. Double Zeta Gundam was approved for production in late 1985, while Zeta Gundam was still in production and scheduled to premiere in March 1986. This left staff very little time to prepare for the new series. The ensuing chaos ended up resulting in one of the more interesting footnotes in Gundam design history. Unlike the original Mobile Suit Gundam 1979, its sequels, Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam 1985 and Mobile Suit Double Zeta Gundam 1986, did not rely on the work of a single mechanical designer. Kunio Okawara's Herculean effort. Can I not say Kunio Okawara or Herculean? What is going on with me? That's too much cultural language. Herculean effort on the original series was unquestionably groundbreaking, but for the show's first sequel, director Tomino pushed for younger staff. Okawara helped with some of the initial design direction, but he stepped aside, allowing young designers like Kazumi Fujita, Mika Akitaka, Mamoru Nagano, and Makoto Kobayashi to take the reins. It's no surprise then that the mechanical design work in Zeta and Double Zeta were some of the most wonderfully eclectic in the history of Gundam, and that is true. I still feel like I'm coming across suits in Double Zeta that I've never heard of. And here we go. Here's a cool little sketch. It has typical Gundam stuff to it. It almost looks like a full armor type. It even has more of a Zeta head to it. But very cool. Very cool to see stuff like this. Here's Makoto Kobayashi's take on both his Double Zeta Gundam and Mamoru Nagano's Double Zeta Gundam. This is in the 1986 issue of My Anime. I mean, I love the Double Zeta. It's like a big, chunky, meaty Gundam. It's like it's so Gundam, yet it's so advanced. And then even this other version over here on the side, I love the way that looks too. So the 5th issue of B Club, published March 30th, 1986, featured Double Zeta Gundam prototype design created by Kobayashi, originally intended to aid Bandai's model kit designers. While rough around the edges and very approximate version of the final design, this hand-built prototype was apparently built by Kobayashi in just 5 days. Despite its faults, it still got 4 pages of full color coverage at the front of B Club, suggesting that Bandai may have been a bit desperate for a model to promote their new series due to last-minute Mobile Suit Switch. Perhaps Toru, Kobayashi's scratch-built model from B Club number 4, had been intended to do that for the previous design. Anyway, cool stuff there. I love little random trivia bits about Double Zeta. Check out my previous video about Glemmy Toto and his blood relation with the zombies. I find that fascinating. Okay, so with Witch from Mercury, episode 12 is here and gone. And we haven't had anything new to really talk about except the prologue. Got a dub. The dub for the other episodes got delayed because of the ice here in Dallas, delayed everything. But from Robert Pinnell, I don't know if anyone noticed it, but if you look back to the post-credit scene where the Ariel's hand slams the soldier, its hand has been bloodied, and when Zeta comes out of the Gundam and stumbles, her exact same hand as the Ariel is bloodied when she reaches out for Mjolnir. Really emphasizing how Zeta and Ariel's bond is so much different than any other Gundam pilots in the past, as if they're one and the same. Yeah, and I wonder how much, again, from reading the novel, I wonder how much the Ariel is okay with this, or is nudging Zeta in a direction through the permit score. I find that interesting. Skyfox, the Move Forward Game 2 mantra has a whole lot of Would You Kindly vibes to me. I believe that's Bioshock. BACD 1990, this was the best one. This was the best one that we got so far in this Gundam series. There were 3 key scenes that I cannot see how they will go forward with in Season 2. Those key scenes are Ghoul killing his father, yes. Zeta seeing death for the first time, and Mjolnir being shocked what Zeta did to defend her. I agree. Those are three big moments that doesn't necessarily tell us where Season 2 is going to go. It could really go anywhere, really, because this isn't specifically about faction versus faction. These are the characters, what they've gone through, and how that's, I guess, going to motivate what they do in the next season. There are also some pretty interesting scenes like Nika using something like Morse code to inform that they are from Earth, and one where Zeta uses her Mobile Suit Gundam Aerial rebuild to unleash a giant blast from her rifle. This really brings back memories from the Gundam movie, Gundam Endless Waltz. That's right, where Hiryu uses Gundam Zero equipped with twin buster rifle to destroy the Maria Army underground shelter. I don't even know if I said that right. Wolf Saints, did you know the beam colors are affected by the output? Low output is green for duels and blue is high output for combat. That's why at 1923 of the episode that guy says it's not meant for combat, that's full power. That's very cool. Oh, and a little back and forth there, so if you want to read that too. I love the lore back and forth in the comments. So Mecha Catalog, I think they actually call the colonies as fronts, which I personally think is a play or throwback on how groups of colonies in the UC are called sides. Yeah. The Jaded One said the Vernier was definitely inspired by the full burn-in and functions as a sort of stabilizer too when the beam rifle goes for full power output. Good point. I love the idea of, Verniers being used. I say thrusters all the time because I think Vernier is a weird word, but it works. They're all around suits. They can be used for different ways of stabilizing a mobile suit. Crying Freeman, Prospera and Zeta's relationship reminds me of a cult leader and cult member. Yeah, it's weird. I don't trust her. I don't trust Lady Prospera. Eric Gann, the original Ariel was cool, but this new version really slaps. I get it, but you know what? I do like that new version. I really like the way it looks. I really think they're calling back to the UC designs, which I like. Oh, long-time subscriber, Santo Bell just watched it. I was waiting for this. Great episode. Can't wait for the second core of episodes. Yeah, same here. DeMeister 1, I think the recent episode showing Delling's sympathetic sides made people forget he still ordered Vanitas to be massacred while perpetuating anti-Earthian economy. Yeah, that's true. They did a good job of making Delling almost seem like a good guy in a way. You almost want there to be a good father for Mjolnir. But yeah, he did some bad things. Well, there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode, just kind of talking about some lore with Gundam Double Zeta. Also went through some Patreon posts and some comments from videos. Expect more of these in the future. Yeah, if you want to join the Patreon, I have a special area. There are actually YouTube membership as well. where you can post questions, comments, anything that then I'll read on the Gundam Explained show that's live on Thursdays. That's then released as a podcast after that on Fridays. And just check the links in the description. You can support the channel that way, or just join the Discord and hang out and talk Gundam. But yeah, where I got the double Zeta from Will, that alternate double Zeta design, that was in our lore section. I kind of like to use that to just throw lore in there just to, yeah, maybe do a video or do some research. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. We'll talk later.